Hello, welcome to the EPG Pathshala program in linguistics. I am Professor Ravinder Gargesh from the Department of Linguistics, University of Delhi. The second module of linguistic stylistics is titled Nature of Verbal Art and Linguistic Stylistics. What is the nature of verbal art and what has linguistic stylistics to do with it? Now, nature of verbal art and linguistic stylistics, we will talk about certain phenomena which have been talked by various scholars. One, that there has been a distinction between ordinary language and literary language. Second, that what is the material that makes literature and what is the relationship of material to the devices, and how is verbal art related to linguistic stylistics? How is it intrinsically related? Can we theoretically justify? And of course, all this comes from the idea that linguistic stylistics is a discipline that studies the area of convergence between language and art. This area of convergence, which has language and artistic elements, this specialized domain is the domain of linguistic stylistics for its study. Again, to mention the main objectives. The objectives are to introduce to you the nature of verbal art and then to view the perspective of linguistic stylistics in relation to verbal art. In this context, the Russian formalists were the first to look at this problem. The Russian formalist scholars had begun working before the First World War, and their work went on even during the Russian Revolution, and after that it frittered away. Now, these Russian formalists saw literariness. They wanted to discuss what is literariness. They saw literariness in terms of defamiliarization of language. It is defamiliarized language. We will look at these things. And this defamiliarization of language distinguishes literary language from ordinary language. Later scholars looked at literature as verbal art. That verbal art comes into existence due to convergence of language and art. Language verbal, art is art. So verbal art. And linguistic stylistics is a discipline that studies this verbal art, the converged area between language and art. What is its nature? How is this relation explained? The idea of literature as verbal art emerges from the fact that it comprises the area of convergence between language and art. We know that language is the discipline that studies language, and aesthetics is the discipline that studies art. Two different disciplines. Since all literature exists in and through language, it is natural that the discipline of linguistic stylistics will essentially be linguistic in orientation, because all forms are in language. Since art mediates with language, linguistic stylistics will also take into account the artistic and aesthetic nature of language. Russian formalists had set the tradition to broaden the scope of linguistics as a science of literature, in order to bring literature into the scope of linguistics. This new perspective initially tried to define literary language. They called literary language literariness. They tried to define literariness, and they tried to define it in opposition to ordinary language. That the differences between ordinary language and literary language will explain literariness. This was the initial premise. Since this approach focused on elements found in literary language as opposed to their non-presence in ordinary language, that was the way they defined literariness. So what are the ramifications of this theory, and what are the ramifications of verbal art? We will look at this phenomena in this module. Coming first to the discussion on the differences between ordinary language and literary language. Now, literary language is generally believed to be distinct from ordinary language, from literary language, and on the basis of the differences perceived, the Russian formalists had attempted to create an independent science of literature. And this science of literature was based on linguistic creativity, as is visible in variant literary forms. They perceived the literary studies in terms of differences between ordinary language and poetic language. And they introduced the concept of actualisation, that is, estrangement, defamiliarization. And they also used the term ostranenie, which again means estrangement, to make strange. What is familiar, to make it unfamiliar, to make it deep, to take away the familiarity, make language such that it becomes no longer familiar, it becomes something special. According to this concept, ordinary language or practical language is used in an automatic way in everyday life, and hence it constitutes the main automatized elements of language. In poetry or in literature, expressions are more prominent, particularly the sounds, the words, the expressions. They make the language strange. They're used in a peculiar way. Why are they used in a peculiar way? It has a function. Language is made strange by these strange kind of constructions. So this, according to Russian formalists, this process is defamiliarization. It makes the language difficult, strange, oblique. And why is this done? They say it is done because this obliqueness of language, making the language oblique, making it unfamiliar, making it defamiliar, taking it not strange, but making it to look new. This is to renew our perception of language. We again focus on the language. Here is a small statement from Shklovsky, one of the major proponents of Russian formalism. He says, in order to recover the feel of life, to feel things, to make the stone stony, to see the stone as a stone, there exists that what we call art. The goal of art is to give feelings to a thing, that something has been seen. Something is seen, not just recognized. We need to look at it afresh. Only then we know what is its new meaning. The device of art is the device of estrangement of things, the device of the impeded form, which increases the difficulty and length of perception time. Since the process of perception in art is an end in itself, and this perception must be prolonged. So the prolongation of the perception takes place by estrangement of language. So certain devices are used so that the language looks different. And when language looks different, people are attracted to this language and they want to make meaning out of it. So the perception time is increased. It is believed that things commonly perceived become automatized, like our currency notes. We use our currency, we never look at it. But when the 2000 rupee note came, first of all, people very carefully look at it. What is this? This newness. This is what is estrangement. Make our familiar language, estrange it in such a way so that we look at it again. As readers, we are forced to look at it again. Once we look at it as something new, we will look at it very carefully, interpret it with more meaning and greater insight. So art aims at defamiliarizing things that have become habitual or automatic. The defamiliarization perception of words in poetry was assumed to be the result of formal basis of poetry. Defamiliarization is what poetry is made of. So we will not call it a deformed language, but something like oblique language, something like breaking the rules of language, reconstructing it in a different way so that people are forced, it attracts our attention. That is the function of literary language. That is where we can identify literariness according to the Russian formalists. So Shklovsky claims poetic speech is formed speech. Because defamiliarization is found almost everywhere, form is found. So form, what is this form? The literary form. The structures, whether they consist of sounds or new vocabulary, neologisms, new words, or new syntactic expressions, new syntactic forms. So all these are, he says, it's formed speech, and literariness resides here. And all this making the form makes language defamiliarized. And it's defamiliarization that attracts our attention, and we have to perceive what is going on, and it lengthens our perception, and we make an effort to understand it. This is how Russian formalists defined literariness. The Russian formalists, by providing centrality to language of text, they devalued the biographical approach, the kind of thing we had talked about in first module. Also, it was difficult for them to explain beauty of the text. Now, the Russian formalists had a problem. They looked at literature as deviant form of language. The deviant forms were the forms that defined literature from non-literature. But if all focus is on deviant forms, then where goes the meaning? Suppose there's a poem, suppose there's a text with very simple structures, not deviant structures. Will that text not be a poem? So such issues came to the foreground, and that led to the later non-acceptance of the Russian formalist theory. Anyway, more emphasis on linguistics was laid by the Russian formalists in their investigation of literature, and they tried that their investigation will be objective, not subjective. Evaluation of literature, analysis of literary language must be objective, not subjective. So this is why they said that there is a need for developing objective methods of analysis. However, in the early years, formalists in their scientific approach paid little regard to theme. They only looked at the form of the structures. And because of defamiliarized structures, they identified literariness. As a result, despite being able to quantify data, they were given the label of formalism by the orthodox Marxists, who enjoyed an official monopoly at that time on sanctioned literary practices. The formalists were attacked that they were only concentrating on form, and they did not look at society at all. So this was one of the things which the Russian formalists could not answer. The formalists initially were interested in the difference between poetic and non-poetic language. Hence, social constructs were out. So they were only interested in the differences between poetic and non-poetic language, or between literary and everyday speech. Everyday language was seen by them as a vehicle for communication and thoughts, and that's all. Society was kept out, social structures were not there. One of the major distinctions the formalists noticed between poetic and ordinary speech was unusual concentration of patterns. There was a system, the patterns were systematized, the deviations were systematic, and they were on various levels of language organization. They were at the levels of sounds, they were at the level of words, they were at the level of sentences. So they looked at them. So they found that specific phonetic sounds and patterns gave rhyme, gave alliteration, gave assonance, gave consonance. So meaning was independent and semantics was not taken into account. And poems, they thought, they tended to make a very liberal use of figurative language. Figurative language we mean using metaphor, using simile, using paradox, using hyperbole, using metonymy, and all those devices which are not taken, generally not used in ordinary language, although we have many expressions which are figurative. So they thought that the main distinction between ordinary and literary language is use of figurative language. On the level of sound, meaning and device, words and ideas fall into distinct patterns. Distinct patterns. So these patterns distinguish ordinary language from literary language. So we can also briefly say about the Russian formalists. Everyday language always points away from itself. It points to some other facts. It draws attention to something else. Poetic language, in contrast, draws attention to itself, not to anything outside itself. It draws attention to itself, and it transforms the word in such a way that we are forced to look at the word and interpret it and see how it is different from the ordinary language. The term poetic language for them refers to prose, poetry, drama, novel, everything alike. So the Russian formalists included all forms of literature. They tried to bring it into the linguistic study, but of course they only restricted themselves to looking at the differences between ordinary language and poetic language. Poetic language was supposed to be defamiliarized language, so they were interested in instances of defamiliarization. So by collecting instances of defamiliarization, they defined literariness. This was what the Russian formalists did. Another very interesting distinction they made was between material and device. The interaction between art and reality were very important for the Russian formalists, and they put in a lot of effort on this. One way was to consider different categories of form and content, because this was criticism against the Russian formalists, that they were only formalists, they never looked at the content. So later they tried to change their position, and they tried to bring in the novel. Their main concept of material and device, when they redefined their formalizations, of course defamiliarization still remained in the center, but these were in the context of novels now. So one of the ways to consider the division of literary work into categories such as form and content, it was taken to be misleading by them. For it implied that there is a separation of form and content. So now they said, no, form and content are not separate. Form and content are one. Form cannot be separated from content, content cannot be separated from form. They cannot be taken apart. In literature, however, the form a work takes is generative of meaning that go beyond the meaning of the bare content. The text is more dynamic. There is language and there is content, but when the two come together, the meaning is much more. The meaning is much more than the sum total of the parts. That is how they began to look at literature. As a result, form becomes content. Now the form becomes content. And by the same token, if a novel uses various stages of a character's life to make divisions in the text, content becomes form. Literature, for them it seems, is created in the interface between what can be called form and content. Instead of form and content, the formalist focused on different relation, one that talks about material and device. The distinction also separates poetic from ordinary language, of course. But in this case, it applies to matter of narrative literature. Now they are talking about novels. When they talk about material and device, they talk about the novel. Material is described by formalists as the raw matter of literary creation. Thoughts, ideas, places, characters, and the rest that go into the construction of a literary work. These are the material. Device is the specific, artful, literary arrangement of this matter. Arrangement into meaningful, active structures that arrange the raw material into art. Material exists not in the text itself, but in the world at large. And it is what the author uses to create his or her tale. The point is very clear. Language is in society. The language from the society is taken to construct the work of art. The language includes the facts of life, the facts of social facts. So social facts encoded in language are taken up together and recreated in the text. So that is what they mean by the material. So device is analogous to the different techniques. Material comes from society, materials come from language, language is society. There are no difference between form and content. This is input into literary creation. And after creativity, it becomes different. And device is analogous to different techniques. For example, the painter uses the material, different medium, and creates a different kind of a painting, different shades. Similarly, different devices are used by creative writers, by literary writers in their text. The material is the material from real society, which is recreated, artistically created, and through the devices. The creativity takes place through the devices. So there's a relation between material and device. The terms material and device in the analysis of the novel aid in the understanding of how creativity takes place. The Russian formalists use two terms. One is fabula, the other is syužet. Fabula means roughly story, and syužet roughly means the plot. So they began to look at story and plot and the difference between story and plot in terms of defamiliarization. Story is the basic thing, and the plot is defamiliarization of a story. While story is often used to refer to the contents of the work, plot refers to the actions and events as they actually unfold in the text. Recognizing the need for some distinction between the terms, the formalists described fabula, that is story, as series of events occurring in their chronological order, in a temporal sequence. One event after another, put in a sequence, gives us a story. Syužet, on the other hand, is the artistic presentation of fabula. The very nature of art demands that the artist selects some aspect of presentation and makes it very interesting. He reorders the story. He reorders the situations, and we get the plot. For example, in a story, we will have a beginning and a middle and an end in a straight line. In a plot, the story may begin from the end. It may begin from the middle. There may be flashback. There may be flash forwards. So this is different from the way a story is. It violates the temporal sequence of story. It has this kind of structure is called syužet, which is the plot. So this was the Russian formalist, and even the story being converted into plot is recognized through the principle of defamiliarization. A story is defamiliarized and we get the plot. In the difference between ordinary language and poetic language, again it was defamiliarization of ordinary language which gave us poetic language. So defamiliarization has been a very crucial concept for the Russian formalists. Now let us come to the term verbal art. Roman Jakobson has used the term verbal art for literature. Verbal art means that all literature is in and through language, written or spoken. So this lends emphasis to language as meaningful units in literary communication. There is a verbal dimension of meaning and there is an aesthetic dimension of meaning or an artistic dimension of meaning, two dimensions of meanings. And they are not separate. Once they come together, it's a dynamic relationship. The word art in verbal art points to aesthetics and verbal points to language, and the two, verbal art. It is these two dimensions that make a literary artifact simultaneously verbal and simultaneously aesthetic. So two sides of the coin, but indivisible sides. Indivisible sides. So because of this, there's a dualism. Sometimes people have created a distinction that we study the language part and not the art part, and some people study the art part and not the language part. This is a misnomer according to Jakobson. The two should be studied together, not separately. They need to be studied in conjunction with one another. So We have scholars like Saporta, scholars like Roman Jakobson, who have thought that the two are inseparable. We need to link the two and make a study which we call stylistics. So stylistics as a theory of verbal art does not view verbal aspect and art aspect as a dual thing, as a schism. There is no schism between the two. They are not different. They are the same. So stylistics looks at it as a single entity. And nor does it view that there are two different entities put together in one place. It is not even that. It is not two entities being put side by side in a box and we call it verbal art. No. It is not art and language put together. No. They are in a dynamic relationship. Language takes on artistic facts, art takes on language facts. They are just become one entity. They are not two separate entities. So without giving undue importance to either of the dimensions, stylistics considers verbal art to be the area of convergence. This converged area is one single area. Converged area is one single area, inclusive of language and artistic facts. They're not two different facts, they're one. Theoretically, we looked at them separately, but practically, they become one. So we need a linguistics which is artistic in orientation, which will be able to account for art. We should be able to account for how this artistic meaning is generated. How does it come about? So that is what we are actually talking in this module. One of our famous Indian scholars, Kelkar, he had made a distinction between the use of language and aesthetic life. We use language in different ways and aesthetic life is in different ways. There are different manifestations of art. There are different manifestations of language. And how did he see the position of literature vis-a-vis aesthetics and art? Now, what Kelkar did was, he saw use of language in terms of letters and non-letters. Letters are those documents which are preserved, like important speeches, like important declarations, various factors like important philosophies, psychological theories, even literature. These are letters. And then there are non-letters, language used every day, not kept as a record. On the other hand, the aesthetic life is also subdivided. He sees it as consisting of two, that aesthetics can be viewed in terms of emanating from fine arts, or aesthetics can be seen in non-artistic aesthetic events. Fine arts, we know, all art, all fine arts, dance, drama, music is fine arts. These are all artistic constructs. They're artistic constructs. They have an aesthetic dimension. But what are these non-artistic aesthetic events? Non-artistic aesthetic events are art means wherever man mediates and constructs and creates, it is art. Where man does not create, then it is not art. But it may be aesthetic, so non-artistic aesthetic event. For example, sunset, a morning sunset over the hill, sunrise over the hill, sunrise over the sea, a beautiful scene. It is not an artistic construct, but it gives us aesthetics, it gives us pleasure. These are non-artistic aesthetic events, natural phenomena. Whereas fine arts are man-created. Letters are created by man. Further, Kelkar views letters as consisting of two components. One, non-literature, the other, literature. So letters consist of very important documents like important speeches, like philosophy, like psychology, like history. All these come under non-literature, but they are very important letters. And on the other side, we have literature. Similarly, fine arts also have two components. One is literature and the other is other arts. So other arts go towards dance, music, drama, whereas literature is the area of convergence of letters and fine arts. So Kelkar viewed literature as convergence area of letters and fine arts. That means of the use of language and the use of aesthetic life. So literature essentially consists of two, and they are indivisible. So this was Kelkar's perspective. He adopted the convention of letters and non-letters, fine arts, and so on. So the difference between other arts and between literature is the difference of the medium. The aesthetic life getting manifested through the medium of language results in the creation of literature. This leads him to posit stylistics as a discipline. Kelkar posited stylistics as a discipline for the study of literature, which has to be seen as an extension of aesthetics and not just as an extension of grammar. So it has to be both extension of linguistics and also extension of aesthetics. In a similar way, another Indian scholar, Srivastava, he also looked at verbal art. He looked at literature as verbal art as an area of convergence between language and art. He conceived of the idea that linguistics is central to language, study of language, and aesthetics is central to study of art. Now the area of convergence, where we have literature, which is language also, art also. So that area requires a specialized discipline, which Kelkar called stylistics, and even Srivastava called it stylistics. So stylistics is the area that studies the area of convergence of language and art. And we call it linguistic stylistics because it is mainly language. All literature is in language, it has to be part of linguistics. So what have we said so far? That linguistic stylistics is the discipline that studies the forms that language takes when language converges with art. While linguistics is the discipline that studies the structure and functions of language, and aesthetics is the discipline that studies art, stylistics is the discipline that studies the converged area. Srivastava had talked about a lingua-aesthetic approach, but that needs to be modified because there is a sign system involved. It can be a semiolinguistic approach rather than a lingua-aesthetic approach. Nonetheless, linguistic stylistics will be global in orientation, and it will be able to analyze literary language if we look at language in a global perspective, and linguistics also in its wider domain of knowledge. In that way, linguistic stylistics as part of linguistics would be able to study literary style. So what have you known in this module so far? We try to see the evolution of stylistics and the evolution of the perspective to language. The first perspective that was given was by the Russian formalists, that literary language is different from ordinary language, and we need to posit a science of literature. We need to posit an objective discipline that is able to study literature. For this, they brought up the notion of defamiliarization. The defamiliarization initially looked at the differences between ordinary language and literary language, and they thought this is literariness. When they were charged with being formalists, they took up the material and device concept, and they began to look at language not as divorced from society, but language in society as input into literature, as the material from which literature is created. And that gives us, it are the devices used that make this material different. It converts it into literature. The devices are the devices which we find in literature, metaphors and all those kind of things. But in addition, they focused on narrative, and in the narrative they talked about fabula and sujet. Fabula is story, plot is very creative, story is a simple temporal sequence of events, and when the simple temporal sequence of events is defamiliarized, made strange, we don't know when the novel will begin, we don't know how it ends, there may be flashback, there may be flash forward, all those temporal sequences are violated in the narrative. Then there is defamiliarization has taken place, and this gives us art. So this is how the Russian formalists had defined it for us. Later, Roban Jakobson and Indian scholars Kelkar and Srivastava, they looked at our literature as verbal art. Verbal art does not mean that language is one, and art is another. No, they are two united into one. It's not a mixture, it's a recreation into one entity. 1 plus 1 is not 2 with 1 plus 1. It's 1 and 1 plus 1 is 1. One language, one art becomes one literature. And this one literature is viewed by Roman Jakobson as noble art, by Kelker as the converged area between use of language and use of aesthetic life, and by Srivastava as convergence area between language and aesthetics. So the convergence area of convergence, where language has aesthetic function, that is the domain of linguistic stylistics. It looks at the aesthetic function through the study of language of the text.